Imagine the perfect all-American family from the post-war baby boom. A handsome, charismatic, and ambitious father, a beautiful, artistic, and devoted mother, and 12, yes, 12, happy, healthy, and high-achieving children. They live in a beautiful home on a picturesque street in Colorado, a street called Hidden Valley Road. It is the absolute technicolor picture of the American dream. Now imagine that a silent, invisible, and terrifying lottery begins to play out inside that perfect house. One by one, the children who were once the golden embodiment of promise begin to fall. The family's brilliant oldest son descends into a private world of delusion and rage. Then another son follows, and then another, and another, until 6 of the 10 Galvin boys have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, one of the most mysterious and devastating mental illnesses known to humankind. Robert Kolker's Hidden Valley Road is the incredible, heartbreaking, and unforgettable true story of the Galvin family. But it is also a thrilling scientific detective story. It's a journey into the history of our understanding of the human mind and a profound philosophical inquiry into one of the oldest and most enduring questions of our existence. What makes us who we are? Is it the family that raises us or the genes we are born with? It is the epic story of a family that, through its own unimaginable tragedy, would become one of the most important case studies in the history of brain science. The Dream on Hidden Valley Road. To understand the tragedy, you first have to understand the dream. Don and Mimi Galvin were the picture of mid-century American aspiration. Don was a handsome and driven officer in the Air Force, a man who believed in discipline, achievement, and the boundless promise of the American future. Mimi was a beautiful, artistic, and deeply dedicated mother and homemaker, a woman who prided herself on her perfect home and her large, impressive family. Between 1945 and 1965 they had 12 children, 10 boys and 2 girls. They were a living embodiment of the post-war baby boom. The family was a whirlwind of activity, of sports, of music, of academic achievement. The early chapters of the book paint a vivid picture of this idyllic, almost mythic family life. They were known around town as the perfect family, a testament to the power of hard work and good, clean living. But beneath this shiny, perfect surface, there were cracks. Don was a demanding and often distant father, his ambition for his children sometimes bordering on authoritarian. Mimi, overwhelmed by the task of raising 12 children, was a perfectionist who fought a constant, desperate battle to maintain an image of flawless domestic order. There were secrets, there was pressure, and there was a hidden tension that would later be scrutinized by an entire generation of psychiatrists. For a long time, the family's success and its picture-perfect image were able to conceal the fractures that were forming deep inside, the cracks in the foundation. The first crack to break through the surface was the oldest and most promising of the Galvin boys, Donald. Donald was the golden boy. He was handsome, athletic, a brilliant student, the one who was destined for greatness. But in the late 1960s, as a young man in college, he began to change. His behavior became erratic. He would get into strange, violent fights. He would have bizarre, irrational breakdowns. The family was completely baffled. They didn't have a language for what was happening. They tried to explain it away. It was stress, it was a phase, it was a spiritual crisis. They took him to doctors who offered little help. Donald's life and the family's dream for him began to unravel. And then, the unthinkable happened. A horrifying domino effect began to play out. The second oldest son, Jim, also began to show signs of a severe mental breakdown, culminating in a violent and shocking act against his wife. Then a third son, then a fourth, then a fifth, then a sixth. One by one, over the course of about 15 years, 6 of the 10 Galvin boys descended into the terrifying, private, and often violent world of schizophrenia. The Galvin house on Hidden Valley Road was transformed from a symbol of the American dream into a living nightmare. It became a place of locked doors, of unpredictable violence, of paranoid delusions, of screaming matches, of shattered plates and broken furniture. It was a family under a constant, unrelenting siege from within, and for a very long time they suffered in isolation, hiding their terrible secret from the outside world, crushed by a sense of shame, of confusion, and of profound, unanswered questions. Why was this happening to them? What had they done to deserve this? The war of ideas, nature versus nurture. While the Galvins were living their private nightmare, a fierce and often cruel war of ideas was raging in the world of psychiatry. And the Galvin family would find themselves at the very center of it. For much of the mid-20th century, the dominant theory for the cause of schizophrenia was based on nurture. It was the era of Freudian psychoanalysis, which taught that mental illness was a product of a dysfunctional family environment of repressed traumas from early childhood. This led to the creation of one of the most toxic and damaging ideas in the history of psychiatry, the theory of the schizophrenogenic mother. This theory, which was widely accepted for decades, argued that schizophrenia was caused by a specific type of mother, a woman who was cold, domineering, perfectionistic, and subtly rejecting of her children. The mother, the theory went, created a confusing and contradictory emotional environment that literally drove her children insane. For mothers like Mimi Galvin, this theory was not just an academic idea, it was a devastating indictment. She, and thousands of mothers like her, were blamed for their children's illness. They were told by the experts they had turned to for help that it was their fault. Mimi, who had dedicated her entire life to her children, was now being told that her own mothering was the source of their suffering. The guilt was immense and suffocating. But a new idea was beginning to emerge. A new generation of researchers, armed with the tools of modern genetics, began to suspect that schizophrenia was not a psychological problem, but a biological one. They believed the cause was not bad parenting, but bad genes. This was the nature side of the debate. And for these new researchers, the Galvin family was a kind of holy grail. A family with 12 children, 6 of whom had schizophrenia, was a statistical impossibility, a 1 in 100 million occurrence. Their unique and tragic genetic makeup made them, in the words of one scientist, the most genetically valuable family in the world for the study of schizophrenia. They were the key that could finally unlock the biological secrets of this devastating disease. And so the scientists came knocking. A Family Under Siege, the Human Cost of a Mystery. Hidden Valley Road is not just a scientific history, it is a deeply empathetic and unflinching look at the human cost of this mystery. Kolker takes us inside the Galvin house and shows us what it was truly like to live in a state of constant, low-grade terror. The book is a powerful tribute to the Wells siblings, the 6 children who did not develop schizophrenia, but who were nonetheless deeply scarred by the illness that consumed their family. They became the caregivers, the peacekeepers, the silent witnesses to the chaos. The 2 daughters, Margaret and Mary, who later changed her name to Lindsay, in particular, bore an incredible burden. They had to navigate a home filled with the unpredictable and often violent behavior of their brothers. They lived with a constant sense of fear, but also a deep sense of guilt for being the ones who were spared. Their story is a profound and moving exploration of the nature of survivorship and the invisible wounds that trauma can leave behind. And at the center of it all are the parents, Don and Mimi. They are complex and deeply flawed characters. Don, the patriarch, retreats into a kind of stoic denial, unable to cope with the collapse of his perfect family. He focuses on the careers of his Wells sons, almost as a way of pretending the other half of his family doesn't exist. Mimi, on the other hand, is the one who is left to manage the daily grinding reality of the crisis. She is a figure of incredible, almost superhuman resilience. She endures the violence, she navigates the broken mental health care system, she fights for her sons, and she lives with the crushing weight of the blame that the psychiatric establishment has placed upon her. She is not a perfect mother. She is often angry, frustrated, and makes mistakes. But her fierce, unwavering, and often desperate love for all of her children, both the sick and the well, is the powerful, tragic, and beating heart of the book. The long search for the genetic code. The final thread of the book is the story of the scientists who began to study the Galvins. In the 1980s, a brilliant and compassionate researcher named Lynn DeLisi, who was a leading proponent of the genetic theory of schizophrenia, learned about the family. She convinced them, after years of being poked and prodded by researchers who had only ever blamed them, to participate in her research. The Galvins agreed, in the hopes that their family's tragedy could be used to help others. They donated their blood, their DNA, and their stories to science. This was an incredible act of generosity born from immense suffering. Kolker does a masterful job of explaining the complex and often frustrating science of genetics in a clear and accessible way. He takes us inside the labs at the National Institute of Mental Health. He shows us the painstaking process of DNA sequencing, of searching through the billions of letters of the human genome for the tiny, specific variations that might be linked to schizophrenia. The search was not easy. For decades, the scientists, including the brilliant researcher Robert Friedman, who took over the study, chased down false leads. They discovered that schizophrenia is not like Huntington's disease, caused by a single faulty gene. It is an incredibly complex, polygenic illness, likely caused by a combination of many different common and rare genetic variants. But the Galvin family's DNA provided crucial clues. It helped scientists to identify specific genes that were implicated in the disease, and it helped to definitively prove once and for all that schizophrenia is a biological disease of the brain, not a psychological result of bad parenting. The Galvins, in their own way, helped to lift the terrible burden of shame from an entire generation of families. The ultimate message of Hidden Valley Road is a story of incredible tragedy, but it is also a story of incredible resilience, of purpose, and of hope. It is the story of a family that was shattered by a mysterious and terrifying illness, but that never completely broke. And it is the story of how that same family, by sharing their pain and their DNA with the world, made an immeasurable contribution to our understanding of the human mind. The book is a powerful tribute to the Galvins, and it is a profound philosophical reminder that sometimes, out of our deepest and most private pain, can come our greatest and most public gifts to humanity. It is a deep inquiry into the very nature of what is broken and what can be healed. If you believe in the power of human stories to illuminate the biggest scientific and philosophical questions of our time, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue the journey together.